This program is brought to you in part by SalCal Real Estate Connections. Yes, welcome back to the Telescope View as we are covering the Roswell incident. In the last episode, we talked about many things about this incident, and we're going to have to go over this again, Rick. Now, we left off talking about a bunch of different things that were mistaken as far as whether they were UFOs or balloons. Now tell me, we talked about the grays too, which I want to get into, what the grays really mean to us. And tell me, where did we leave off as far as how the military left this thing?
Well, we talked about the UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1978, and that the Army Air Corps immediately issued a press release that they had found a flying disc or a flying saucer, and then they, of course, retracted that and said, oh no, it was a weather balloon. But in reality, what we learned from some high-ranking military intelligence people who saw reports is that a craft not of this world, a non-terrestrial craft, did in fact crash in Roswell. And that what they called alien entities were found, or alien bodies. And at the time, and even to this day, we call this type of bodies, we call them the grays.
The grays.
And how big were they about?
4 to 5 feet.
Okay.
Very slight bodies, large heads. That image you see of an alien every time you turn around, that tear-shaped head with the big black eyes, those are typically referred to as the grays. There's other names for them, but they're referred to as the grays. And we were talking about them, but what we learned was that, according to classified reports, that the grays were not actual alien life forms. That they were, in fact, biological creations, this is what the U.S. military believed, of an advanced extraterrestrial race.
Biological creations.
Yeah. You got to bear with me on this one. But here, what they're talking about is, if you look at the gray, what they were is, in effect, a robot or a probe or a drone, if you will, but was created using biological methods instead of mechanical methods that we use today. Okay. We
give them a human-like
form. Kind of what they want. Now, if you look at the grays, and just stick with me here for a minute, let's just examine them for 1 minute. This is what these men explained to me. The grays had this large bulbous head. Okay, these creatures, what they believed and they learned, were designed for space travel. These large bulbous heads were large to cushion their brains or their computer from any potential impacts or gravities that they may find. Does that make sense? It does. Their eyes were oversized, large, and black. Why? To account for different lighting conditions that they might find in different worlds. And we know that to be true. They had no lungs and no digestive systems. Again, for something that would travel through space, this makes sense. How much food can you carry? Do you want to carry? And lungs? Well, you don't know what you're going to breathe, so you wouldn't want them. And their slight little bodies? Well, if you don't know what type of gravity you're going to encounter on different worlds, you want a form that's not going to have a lot of resistance to gravity or have a lot of mass to them. These men assured me this is what we found.
Well, in reality, Rick, I mean, let's take today. When we explore space or the moon or whatever, I mean, what are we sending out there?
We're sending out probes, and some of them are like in our image. Now, people look at me and say, that can't happen. All right, if you don't believe that, that's fine. Let me bring up something to you, and we've talked before about DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Go online, type in DARPA, and you will see all their public projects. They're very secret. DARPA's job is to make sure that the United States never falls behind anybody in terms of technology. That's all they do.
That's their job. Yep.
A couple of years ago, DARPA began a project called the Engineered Living Materials Project. The idea was to create materials out of living matter that we could use to duplicate, for example, this metal here, but it would be living material. It could have the same qualities and the same capabilities as living materials. So what are we doing with living materials? What are we going to build from that? I can tell you a few things. We can build aircraft skins from that. The idea is to be able to control these materials, to know when they're damaged, and allow them to repair themselves. So the Engineered Living Materials Project is very real, and it's going on today. So how long will it be before we take a mechanical robot and start to create it using biological materials, such as this Engineering Living Materials Project or nanotechnology that we're using? Yep. What are we going to do 100 years in the future? Is this possible to us in 100 years? We're already creating skin.
And if at some point we had created time travel, we wouldn't know because we haven't created it yet.
Right.
But something else could come back here from another time.
But we're going to create this stuff. Going forward, we're certainly going to get to this point. And we tend to create things in our image. We create robots that look like us. We create probes that look like insects or fish or birds. Our submarines are supposed to kind of look a little bit like dolphins. So for people who say, oh, such technology couldn't exist, well, we're already doing it today. And where will we be in 100 years? And if there's a civilization out there that's like us, but 100 years or 200 years or 1,000 years advanced, could they have created such an entity? Yeah, probably. I think we could. The Engineered Living Materials Project, we create now skin using 3D printers. They're starting to talk about creating organs using 3D printers. Great Britain is creating aircraft. They're chemically growing aircraft. Drones.
Oh, really?
And they grow it instead of print it or construct it. So this type of technology, although it seems far-fetched, maybe even more so in 1978 when the story came out, now as we look at our own technology, it's very possible. And don't take my word for it. Go to the DARPA website and look at some of the things they're doing. DARPA. They have a biological control project where we can control biological systems to know when it's sick or when it's damaged or whatever. What do you think we're going to do with that? What biologics do you think we're going to entertain with that? Where are we going to introduce those type of controls? Soldiers. We have that type of technology. That's just one thing.
That is the future, without a doubt.
Oh, so when we talk about these biological entities, and these men said, oh, what we learned about them back then, according to classified studies, it was this. Well, maybe in 78 that wouldn't have made sense, but today, to me, it's plausible. And that was just one thing that they talked about. They talked about other things that were found.
Now, with the information that you have, Rick, I mean, obviously, you can share that here. And a program like this is a wonderful place to share it and hopefully you as the viewer are really enjoying the information that Rick has. But Rick, when you aren't doing this type of thing, you've got all this knowledge, are you still out there sharing it with people? Do you go to speakers groups or where else do you do this? You don't sit alone in a room all day and do this by yourself, do you, Rick?
You might be surprised. It's interesting, and we've talked about this. Is we put the book together, me and these other guys, and I said, okay, we put the book together. People are going to read it. They're going to have some fun. We believe it's the truth.
And the name of the book again?
The Final Revelation of the Sun Project.
Okay.
But we got some pushback from some places we never thought we would. And I've had the question many times, would you write the book again? I don't know. We pushed the envelope. I will talk about what we put in the book. I will not talk about what did not go in the book, and they told me more.
Okay.
I will not talk about anything that has to do with cyber warfare, cyber information, or any of that stuff that I worked with. I won't talk about that. But I'll talk about what they told me. And I think we are pushing the envelope. But at this point, like I said, we've already run into problems with this. People, not that they just don't believe us, they just don't want us saying it. All right, I can deal with that. We've already dealt with it. I don't know how far it can get, but it's gotten far enough. We've had that discussion, and we're not going to talk about that on the air. So I believe what these men told me was the truth, and I've told many people. I sat in some of these sessions. I've been a believer since I was a kid. We've talked about this. And I always thought, gee, when I learned about this, I'd be excited. Yet when they hit certain topics, you know that feeling you get, that real sinking feeling in your stomach when something bad happens and you sit there and you go, you just feel everything drain. A couple of times that happened to me, and I stopped. And I said, all right, you guys, I've known you for years. You're messing with me, right, Phil? You're messing with me, right, Paul? And Phil, and this man was in the Navy, and he's what they call a Mustang. He started out as an enlisted sailor. He went all the way to the top. He had this close-cropped gray hair. He smoked cigars. He was a stereotypical sailor. And he looks at you in the eye and he goes, listen, I don't have time for this. You asked me, we didn't ask you. If you don't believe us, I'm out of here. Okay. So I'm telling you what was told to me. I'm telling you what I believe. And I'm telling you based on my experience, what I've seen, and is it plausible to me? And we're going to talk about some things that, to me, I don't believe happened, and people are going to get upset about that. But I'm telling you what I know. And we're going to talk about some incidences that happened but didn't happen. But we got a few other things here that we can talk about that happened at Roswell that people might be interested in. What we have right here is what I call a representation of a crystal sphere. It's 6 inches. According to these men, 3 crystal spheres were found in the crash at Roswell. By the way, they don't believe that the lightning caused the crash, that it was something within the ship that went bad after the impact that made the ship come down. 3 crystal spheres. We did not know what they were for many years, although some people felt this must be some type of data source. There must be some type of information in there. It was a crystal sphere, but it was opaque. It was smooth on the outside, but it was opaque. Now, for many years, people say, well, that's impossible. You can't store data in crystals. Now, we know from CDs and DVDs that we can use now optics to store data. But on CDs and DVDs, we're burning pits in there. And depending on how many pits we burn per inch or whatever, it might be a regular DVD or a high-res, Blu-ray. Now, Blu-ray uses a different laser. That's why the laser reads more. So we knew you could do that. But not that we could just use crystal to store data. Well, I remember when I was working in the computer field with IBM, IBM was starting to look into late 80s, early 90s, storing data using light frequency. But boy, that's tricky, and we know about holograms. All right, let's fast forward to a few years ago, and what has been developed. Now, we had this. Now, they believed it was a data source, and they believed when they tested that it was vibrating somehow in the center. But nobody knew much about it. And in the late 80s and the 90s, they started to learn more about pulling data from this, and they actually supposedly were able to pull some data from it. But people are going to say, that's impossible, those things can't exist. Okay, now we come dawn of the time of the Superman memory crystal, which is in the last few years, both in the United States and Great Britain, they have been experimenting with a thing called the Superman memory crystal. It's using crystals to store data using light frequencies. This is real. Look up Superman memory crystal. Not only can you store data, but you can store so much data, it's orders of magnitude more than what we can do today, and it will last for thousands of years because it's in a crystal. All right? Real stuff. So if we can do it today, if an advanced race exists, and we talked about it in the opening that there's 220 million galaxies out there, why couldn't they do it? Now, some people said to me, well, you got to have a power source to maintain it. Well, not necessarily. We don't know everything there is to know. So we go from the Superman memory crystal to the nuclear diamond battery. Recently written up in Forbes magazine, it's been the nuclear diamond battery is using man-made diamonds along with nuclear spent fuel from like hospitals and things like that, because the radiation level is very low, to create batteries that will last 1,000 years.
1,000 years.
And right now the voltage is very, very low on that. So they said we can only do things like power certain things in satellites, pacemakers. But now we have a means where we have a crystal that we can store data, and we have a battery that could actually be used to keep it going for thousands of years. So again, we come back to if we can do it, can somebody else do it? Now, the Superman memory crystals, the Roswell crystal spheres, and then at some point we're going to get into the ancient astronaut theory. We're going to talk about the Egyptian god Aten. And Aten was always depicted as a disk. But in fact, if you look at the reliefs of Aten, there's actually a dome to them, which means what the Egyptians were trying to tell us is this was a sphere. And Aten is shown in a couple of reliefs, and we'll talk about this later, where he's actually disseminating information to people.
I have one question, Rick. When they found these spheres, was that at the farm or was that the second crash site?
Second crash site.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
And didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's another piece. And we have a few other pieces here that we can talk about. One of which is over here, which is what you have there, right there, Steve. Jesse Marcel Jr., then about 11 years old, the son of Jesse Marcel Sr., the colonel. said that his father brought him what looked like an I-beam. It really wasn't made out of wood. He goes, today he would say it's made out of plastic. Now you need to know that Jesse Marcel Jr. grew up to be a doctor and was a flight surgeon for the United States Air Force, served a couple of tours in combat. Very well respected man. He said, this is what he saw. A little thing like this. And he said, what was on it were hieroglyphics. He had never seen anything like them before. So what we have here is a representation of what Jesse Marcel Jr. said he saw. And the hieroglyphics on it are exactly the images he said he saw.
Now,
Okay.
what did the government say he saw?
Now, they said, well, this is an 11-year-old boy, and I agree with them. What could he remember? What could he possibly know? Well, what they said he saw was what you're seeing on this piece of wood. And what you're seeing on this piece of wood
Decoration.
is decorated Scotch tape. Now, I don't know if you remember as a kid, my mother used to rap with this. This is from the 50s and 40s. My mother used to rap with this, and it came with all different types of decorations on it. And what some scientists said that Jesse Marcel actually saw was a piece of these beams that actually had been held together. I guess the government was saving money with leftover rolls of Christmas tape. All right. Now, can you identify this? Does this look like hieroglyphics to you? I have 4 different versions over there. I've tried to look up every other version that I can find, and none of them look like hieroglyphics. So the question is that a logical rationale or explanation that what an 11-year-old saw was Christmas tape, and that we used that Christmas tape to hold together?
That is kind of hard
these
to
radar
believe.
reflectors? Little hard to believe. Could it have happened with the U.S. government? Anything could have happened. So that's another piece of this story that doesn't seem...
Well,
when a story goes like this, I've got to know more.
That's for sure.
Where did you find this stuff?
Oh, I find this stuff. I get
But you don't see things. This is like this. I see that. Can I say the name on the side?
Oh,
of it?
Scotch tape.
It's Scotch.
It's real Scotch tape from the 40s.
This is just what you would see wrapping your Christmas presents back then.
Now remember, when Marcel Jr. got older, he was in a position to look at this, and he had nothing to gain from this, because everybody was criticizing his father anyway, to say, yeah, I made a mistake, maybe it wasn't. But he didn't. He knew what it was at that point, and he maintained the fact that he did not see Christmas tape. That was not what he saw, and the beams were not, they were more of what he describes today as a plastic, which he wouldn't have described back then as a plastic.
Yeah.
So the question still becomes, how did he make this type of a mistake? Is it possible he could have made this mistake? I think it becomes more and more plausible that he was telling us what he saw and what actually happened. All right? So, the question continues, what happened? And what about Marcel? Why did he all of a sudden change his story? Because he was ordered to do so. And he was a good soldier. And so was became General Blanchard, Colonel Blanchard. They were told what to do, and they did it because it was their duty. They took an oath to defend their country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And if they were told this was a national security issue and their job was to defend this country, that's what they did. They were good soldiers. They were promoted for doing so. All right? This is what happened. So, we look at this and we ask a lot of questions. What happened here? Is this a fact of we found something they couldn't understand, or did we really find something not of this world? People will come back to me and they'll say, oh, the General Accounting Office did a search for UFOs, Roswell, flying discs, and all the data that's out there. Okay, and they didn't find anything. Well, let me tell you a few things that I happen to know for a fact that I can tell you from data authentication, data security, and all that. First of all, this data, and according to these men, is not located in the same places, today we call them servers, as other data. It's not in the Library of Congress. It's not any of those places. It's in a very secure location, and it's only certain data, only certain people can see it. Okay. The other thing is, I also know for a fact is that when we want to keep data or information secret, first of all, what these men told me is, according to classified files, it was stated that in any of these reports, not one of these reports was to reference in any way the word Roswell, flying disc, flying saucers, or anything like that, because that would be too easy to search for. Instead, they would use the item, which we use today, or they would use the incident, excuse me. But in no way would we do this. There was also, and people misunderstand the top secret classification. There's only 4. There's no such thing as a above top secret. There's what we call control keys or control systems, and now they have different names. There was one called Ultra during World War II, and that was the ciphers and decoding. There's one called Umbra, and that's signal intelligence. There's a code name for Roswell, which I will not tell anybody because it's the only way I know of talking to somebody. If they know that code name, they know something about Roswell. But the bottom line is, first of all, the GAO is not in a position to get this information, even if it was out there. And the people who are looking for it would not be in a position to reveal it if they did learn it. So the fact that there's no secret information about this doesn't mean anything.
Man, oh man, oh man.
Well, that's certainly a mouthful, and I'll tell you, I am just at awe of what went on during that time period. And as usual, Rick, time flies as you're having fun, and we're going to have to say goodbye for today. And I want to remind everybody to email us at theviewshow@aol.com, and we will try to get back to you with all your information, and we are also going to answer some of the questions on the show. And I'll tell you, I cannot wait for our next episode.
And if somebody wants more information, there's a lot more information about all this stuff and the stuff we talk about. If you go to facebook.com/ET Intelligence Report, you'll see the website for the book.
Yep.
But I'm not telling you that for the book. You want to read the book, great. I don't make a living from that. But I'd like you to read the other articles that we have in there that kind of put this in perspective with science. I think a lot of people have read that. And I would never believe we would have gotten that many followers, but people like it. So it's facebook.com/ET Intelligence Report.
Well, I'll tell you, Rick, I cannot wait for our next meeting to cover more of this.
And they don't even know what we're talking about off the air.
They don't. Well, we're gonna get into the aftermath of this incident, and believe me, it had my attention when I was a young man. Project Blue Book, hey, that was my favorite TV show.
We're going to talk about that. I got the old videos if you ever want to see them.
Oh, my dear.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what I call fact versus fantasy.
Very good.
What is real and what isn't.
Very good. Thank you for watching the show tonight. Okay? We want to thank Nutmeg TV for all their help and support for making this show possible, and our crew with cameraman Bill Majak and, of course, the host of the show. This program is brought to you in part by SalCal Real Estate Connections.